You probably know that in Avengers number 4, published in March 1964, it was explained that Captain America and Bucky disappeared during a World War II mission. Captain America was not discovered again until 1964 by the Avengers. But Marvel/Atlas Comics released Captain America and Bucky stories in the 1950s where they fought communists. How is this possible? Welcome to Comic Book Storytime.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about the appearance of the second Captain America in the issues of Captain America and the Falcon number 153 through number 156. And a little background for myself is that I was 10 years old when I discovered comics, and the second or third comic I ever discovered was Captain America and the Falcon. And I fell in love with them. I loved them as a team. They really fit for me. And it was so hard to get comics that I subscribed. Those first 4 issues that I got in my subscription just blew my mind. So it's kind of a story I've been wanting to tell on YouTube for a long time. Basically, the setup at the beginning of issue 153 is Cap and the Falcon are all tired from their last adventures. Cap gets home, and there's a jealous Nick Fury who's all upset because he thinks his girlfriend likes Cap, and he's upset that Cap is younger than him, even though they both fought in World War II. So they have a big fight. It's not really important to the main story. But after that fight, Captain America and his actual girlfriend, Sharon Carter, decide they need to go on a vacation to relax after the hard time they've been going through. They go to the airport, and Sam Wilson, aka the Falcon, goes with them, see them off at the airport, and they buy tickets and they fly off, and Sam watches their airplane take off, and he thinks, there they go, and Lord knows they deserve some time together after all they've been through. It's so darn corny, but when it's all done, love is what it's all about, people loving people. Very, very 1971. So then the story cuts to the Falcon cruising around the city looking for crime, and he happens to see the girl he would like to be his girlfriend making time with another guy who, if we've been reading the series all along, is a member of something similar to the Black Panthers. And Sam Wilson is a social worker and has kind of a more moderate politics. So this woman is constantly bouncing back and forth between them. So then he's all bummed out. You know, other people have love, but I don't. Later, he, in his regular identity as Sam Wilson, approaches Leela, and she says, get away from me. Your superheroes are attacking Black people in the neighborhood. And he says, what are you talking about? That's crazy. I know Cap's away on vacation. And he goes out searching, and there he finds Captain America. He says, it can't be. And Captain America right in the middle of beating up just a regular citizen in, I guess, Harlem, the Black neighborhood that we're in here. And they have a big fight, and he pulls off the cowl off of the fake Captain America, and underneath is the face of Steve Rogers. It looks like the real Captain America. And then Bucky shows up. Total shocker. We all know Bucky is dead. That was like one of the real deaths of the Marvel Universe forever. So the issue ends with, you bet, buddy, now there's nothing to stop the comeback of the real Captain America and Bucky. And that was the cliffhanger of that issue. And I kind of suggested we don't show the cover till talking about the end, but this cover was a real shocker at the time, at least for a kid like me. You know, Captain America beating up people, beating up innocent people, not to mention the racist overtones. You get a very sort of, at least for me at the time, but still when I reread it, kind of emotionally wrenching scene of Captain America beating the heck out of the Falcon. The Falcon fights back really hard, but with Bucky and Captain America fighting him, he can't win. And he realizes this Captain America is even stronger than the Captain America he's aware of. And then it gets even creepier because Captain America picks up the Falcon and he says, we're going to take him to a deserted warehouse and torture him so that he can tell us where that fake Captain America of his is, and so we can kill him. And yeah, here he says, don't worry, pal, the coloreds never bother anybody. So it's like, we don't have to worry about us torturing this guy because those people won't do anything about it. He's totally wrong. Some kids in the neighborhood see him carrying the Falcon off. They go talk to Leela and Rafe, the guy who's the leader of the local activists, and they gather a whole bunch of people from the neighborhood to go rescue the Falcon. Meanwhile, we get a quick flash of the real Captain America, Steve, and his girlfriend off in the Bahamas. And we're starting to get a bit of a sunburn, which is important later. And then we then we get a little bit of this scene of them beating up on the Falcon, and we get even more of an idea of, they talk, your friend is some pinko who duped the American public, who's trying to sell out a great nation to the Reds. I'm the true force of our democracy, and you'll soon admit it, or I'll beat your brains out. So pretty awful guy. A whole bunch of people from the neighborhood come in, along with I love the Falcon. I mean, it's ridiculous, but I love the Falcon's Falcon, who's named Red Wing, who often plays quite a role in things. So there's a big knockout brawl between Captain America and the people from the neighborhood, or not the fake Captain America, and Sam Wilson. The Falcon busts out of his bonds. So it's kind of a big moment for the Falcon, I think, where his community comes and backs him up. And he tells them, he's not the real Captain America, spread the word, and he's got to go, and he gives them thanks. And then he goes to visit the Avengers, which I think is so they could put the Avengers on the cover, because that always helps sell the book. And this is actually a glitch in the story, because he now forgets that he knows where they went, and he goes to the Avengers to ask where Cap went. But in any case, it turns out the imposter Captain America has visited the Avengers mansion just before the Falcon arrived, and he overhears them on a monitoring system and finds out that Captain America's in the Bahamas. So the race is on at the end of that issue. So then we're on to issue 55, which promises the secret origin of Captain America. And again, I think back then, because people were always coming new to comics all the time, they had a lot of origin recap issues, but it's not your Stan Lee origin recap issue. This ends up being an early retcon, you might say. But before we get to that, we're with Sharon and Steve Rogers at the beach. They both now look sunburned. This is the only comic I can remember where the fact that characters have a sunburn is an important factor. But they see Bucky run by, and Cap chases after him and gets bushwhacked by the fake Cap and Bucky. And then the fake Cap puts on Captain America's bathing suit, Steve Rogers' bathing suit, to try to fool the stupid broad, which he calls her, which again is another wording that makes him a bad guy. But she notices that he's not sunburned, so she starts to run away. And they're attacking Sharon is when the Falcon shows up. We get another nice brawl with the Falcon versus the fake Cap and Bucky. Oh, and Sharon gets involved in the fight too. In the end, these overly strong Bucky and Cap, the fake Bucky and Cap, prevail. And then we get your classic scene where fake Cap, the bad guy, is going to tell them his whole story before he kills them. We're inside an airplane now. So the whole background that the imposter Cap gives is he's the Captain America of the 1950s. And here's where we get kind of our retcon, because Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, I guess, together, just said that Cap disappeared after World War II. But Marvel Comics briefly had a series about Captain America and Bucky in the 1950s where they fought communists, like communists infiltrating American society, that kind of thing. So basically, they were a comic that would have agreed with McCarthy in the McCarthy era. And he tells a whole story about how, as a young person, he was obsessed with Captain America, the way some people are with Jesus. And after he graduates college, he goes off to Europe and he finds the secret super soldier formula that everyone had lost, or at least a partial version of it. And he goes to the government and shows them the formula, and they agree to make him Captain America. He gets plastic surgery, so he'll look exactly like Steve Rogers. And at the last minute, they tell him, we've canceled your plan to become Captain America because of the politics of the Korean War. We can't send you into war. So he goes and gets a job at a prep school and meets a boy who looks just like Bucky and idolizes Captain America and Bucky. And they become friends. And eventually, I guess they cosplay Captain America and Bucky together for a while. I'm not sure if that's intended, but they administer to themselves, inject in their own arms, the super soldier formula. So now we have a Bucky who has a super soldier formula, but there's something missing from the formula, which makes them stronger. And they have a bunch of adventures fighting communist supervillains. Then they start to go crazy because of that missing part of the formula, the Vita rays, as they say, although it makes them stronger. And they start seeing communists everywhere, particularly amongst Black people and people who are not pure blood American, whatever that means. And finally, they've gotten so violent that the government decides to give them kind of a recall. They capture them and they put them in suspended animation. Why they don't just arrest them and send them to jail, I don't know. And then we get back up to the 1970s, and there's someone working for the government who's so mad that Nixon is going to China. So this government worker releases Captain America and Bucky, and they're going to go after the home front traitor, the Captain America of today that this guy who freed them told them about. And this is where, like, I, as a kid, the one sort of idea I had maybe about racism came from the show All in the Family. So I kind of equated these guys with Archie Bunker, although they're much more violent and worse. But I also thought it was just crazy. Like, he's got the surgery to, it's typical comic book stuff, I guess, the surgery so he'll look exactly like Steve Rogers, to again explain why there seemed to be a Steve Rogers in the 1950s. After they've told the story, it turns out the real Steve Rogers, the sunburned Steve Rogers, has already broken his bonds, and he was just pretending to be tied up so he could hear their story. And we launch into the final issue, the big showdown between the two Captain Americas. And they fly this plane that they're in back to Miami Beach from the Bahamas. And we get the beginning of a fight, then the bad guys run away and says, if you're man enough to continue this fight, meet me at the Torch of Friendship in an hour. So they meet up at this Torch of Friendship and have another big rock'em sock'em fight. This time, Sharon and the Falcon together punch out Bucky. And then there's a long fight sequence between the two Captain Americas. And real Captain America, the real Steve Rogers, realizes that this guy doesn't know he's the real, like, he idolized Steve Rogers from the 1940s, and he's now attacking what he thinks is this commie SJW 1970s version of Captain America. He doesn't realize that this is the real Captain America he's fighting. Another thing to emphasize, I guess, that it becomes obvious in the scene, the guy's costume's all ripped, his shield's kind of broken, because everything he has is kind of fake. It's not the real costume. It's not the real shield. While they're fighting, there's some powerful conversation, I think, at least on a comic book level for the time, for us 10 and 12-year-olds reading it at the time. But Captain America says to the fake Cap, "You think I'm a traitor? Grow up, fella. Times have changed. America's in danger from within as well as without. There's organized crime, injustice, and fascism, or you wouldn't recognize that. Are you calling me a fascist? You mealy-mouthed rat. You're scared to face up to the commies in a war like a real man. I'm a real man, and I'll kill you to prove it." I think here we're getting kind of, at least in the mind of Steve Englehart, the writer, we're getting kind of the 1950s prejudices versus a more idealized version of the 1940s, of the generation that fought the Nazis. And so when Captain America finally defeats the guy, smashing him up against this Torch of Freedom statue, after defeating the fake Cap and looking down at his body, and the police are coming to take him away, and they're going to put them back in their cryogenic sleep, Cap says he'll be fine, I guess. The authorities will put him and Bucky back in their suspended animation tanks until a cure can be found, if one can be found. And I'll go back to fighting for a better America while they sleep. But all the time I'll be thinking that he could have been me. And now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to be alone for just a little while. So I take it now, particularly reading it now, that Steve Englehart is playing with different visions of America, different ways of interpreting America, and how ideals can get warped and vision can get distorted. And so how Captain America realizes he could easily have gone down a more negative kind of road. But I also see Steve Englehart trying to link this early 70s idealism with perhaps the idealism of America when we entered World War II. I'm just guessing on that, but that's kind of my take on it. I have no idea if they ever brought that racist Bucky and Captain America back, because they were tucked away, able to come back. They're tucked away in suspended animation again. Part of why this is meaningful to me, I think, especially looking back on it, is as a kid, it sounds kind of ridiculous now, but as a kid, as I started to learn about America's history and what was happening at the time, I guess this would have been like 5 or 6 years after Martin Luther King was assassinated, and schools were becoming integrated, and there was a lot of different projects going on to try to balance things out after all the time where they've been out of balance. And I grew up at that time thinking that we had solved racism, that we were over the top of the peak and we were fixing it. And this presented to me kind of the view of the old America and the new America, bringing the ideals of America all together in a positive light. And I guess, in a subtle way, I guess it probably didn't seem so subtle perhaps to adults, but in a subtle way, having Captain America and the Falcon being such a great team, facing off against the racist past represented by this commie bashing Captain America from the 1950s, it felt kind of like a catharsis. Like, sadly, I, as a grown-up, discovered over and over again that we didn't solve our problems as well as we thought. But I still, reading this kind of stuff, hope that we're moving forward, and I feel like we are, and that we can. The bad Captain America seems to be all about anger, and the good Captain America seems to be about friendship. The anger in the black neighborhood in New York, Sam Wilson represents kind of a less angry approach, and Rafe, the more angry approach. It took years, I think, before I understood more about, and still there's a lot I don't understand, but like reading Malcolm X and things like that came a long time later for me. And being able to see all aspects of America takes a long time. But I think it was really cool that this comic for kids took that on. And it is interesting to note that after Steve Englehart took over Captain America, sales took off, and it became one of their most popular books for quite a while. And I think it's because he was unafraid to tackle issues head on. People liked hearing about that stuff or reading about it. Got them thinking.
Thank you for watching this second episode of Comic Book Storytime. We hope you've enjoyed it. Check out Sleepy Reader on YouTube for more great comic book content. And please let us know in the comments if you have any opinions about the story given today. Thank you as always for watching.